Hey there. Tonight, we're not walking triumphantly through Roman arches or saluting emperors on marble pedestals. We're slipping down the alley, behind the bakery, past the steam rising from the baths, and into the quiet places history rarely pauses for. The corners of ancient Rome, where the work was constant, the faces were forgotten, and the city only functioned because someone else was sweating for it. Because for every senator arguing in the forum, there was someone grinding grain before dawn. For every general returning in glory, there was someone scrubbing his feet. Rome looked glorious, but not for the people who kept it running. For them, the empire wasn't white stone and public fountains. It was heat, hunger, splinters, the weight of someone else's comfort resting permanently on their back. This isn't a story about power. It's about proximity to it, about what it meant to serve in silence, to wake up in a city that doesn't see you and still do your job so well that it thrives anyway. No titles, no statues, just long hours, low ceilings, and a kind of daily endurance that didn't make it into the history books, but probably should have. So, if you're ready for a different kind of Roman story, one told not from the top, but from the floor up, dim the lights, let the noise fade, and settle in. This won't be loud, but it will stay with you. It's easy to forget how much of Rome was held together by people who owned nothing, not even themselves. The bread didn't bake itself. The aqueducts didn't clean themselves. The marble floors didn't shine without hands that scrubbed them raw. Everything the empire is remembered for, the scale, the sophistication, the spectacle, all of it balanced on the daily grind of workers no one bothered to name. If those slaves hadn't woken before the sun, there's no empire. If the baker didn't knead dough with blistered palms, no one ate. If the bath attendant didn't shovel coal and ladle oil, the senators wouldn't have looked quite so polished. Rome ran because it used people up. Their lives were the fuel. And when they were gone, someone else was thrown in the fire. They weren't building legacy. They were surviving routine, quietly, constantly, without recognition. But remove them, even for a day, and the entire illusion of Roman glory starts to crack. Because without the ones doing the labor, Rome wasn't powerful. It was just hungry and cold. So no, these stories aren't decorative. They're foundational. The names may be missing, but the hands were real, and they touched every part of what we still call civilization. You wake before the world does, before the birds start, before the bathhouses steam, before the city remembers it's alive. The darkness isn't quiet. It hums, dense and damp, full of the breathing of bodies still curled in their corners. You don't stretch. You don't roll over. You get up. The air is thick with the smell of old straw and tired sleep. Somewhere above, wood creaks under a shifting weight. Footsteps, deliberate, not rushed. That's the master. You know his walk as well as your own pulse. The heel digs in first, then the rest of the foot rolls down like he's always preparing to deliver bad news. You've memorized those steps. It's not paranoia. It's survival. Around you, others stir. No one speaks. There's no conversation down here. Just rustling cloth, the muted clack of clay jars, the soft brushing of hands against stone. You dress quickly, pulling yesterday's tunic over stiff limbs. There's no light, but you don't need it. Everything you own fits under your arm. The floor's cold, always cold, but you've learned where to walk to avoid the worst. Patches of wet. Upstairs, someone's dropped a pot. A voice barks out in Latin, clipped and irritated. You recognize the voice, too. One of the stewards. He's never hit you, but he doesn't need to. His tone bruises just fine. You listen carefully for what's next. If he's in a bad mood, the rest of the morning will go badly. You adjust your pace before he even finishes shouting. You're already moving by the time orders start. Water needs to be drawn. The hearth needs to be coaxed into life. Floors swept, cloaks dusted, bread checked. It's too early for the household to be fully awake. But you don't wait to be told. You move like part of the building. Background, expected. If you're noticed, it usually means something's gone wrong. You're not the center of anything. You're the edge of every room. Seen but not acknowledged. Sometimes spoken to, never spoken with. Your job isn't just labor, it's anticipation. You know when the master prefers his sandals arranged a certain way. You know how the lady of the house likes her water warmed. Not too hot, not too fast. You know which child whines before breakfast, and which one throws things when they're bored. Knowing these things isn't a talent. It's what keeps you safe. Your body already aches, not sharply, not urgently, just in that dull, grinding way that comes from days stacked on days without enough rest in between. Your stomach is empty, but you won't eat until the rest are finished. Maybe not even then. Hunger isn't new. It's just a quieter kind of pain. This is how the day begins. Not with a bell or a shout, but with a decision. Not yours. You don't aim for accomplishment. You aim for invisibility. Your job isn't to impress. It's to avoid notice. And if you finish this day without being corrected, without being struck, without drawing attention in the wrong way, that's a kind of success. Quiet, fragile, and easily missed. But it counts. It always counts. You don't remember when you started working in the bakery. You only know that your days have smelled like flour and ash for as long as you've had a name. If you even still have a name. Most people here just call you boy, even when you're well past 30. It's simpler that way. Easier to forget you're human when you're just a function. The heat hits you before the light does. It seeps out of the ovens like breath, thick and endless. The sun isn't up yet, but the fire's been going for hours. Someone tended it through the night. If you're lucky, it wasn't you. If you weren't lucky, your arms are already tired and the day hasn't even begun. You knead until your shoulders go numb. The dough is coarse, barley, and spelt, mostly. Grain the rich wouldn't bother touching. It sticks to your fingers and dries into your skin like a second layer. You move in rhythm, not because it's elegant, but because stopping isn't an option. You've learned the motion that gets the job done without wasting energy. Press, turn, fold, breathe. There's a rhythm to the bakery, but it's not peaceful. It's mechanical. Everyone moves around each other in the narrow space, ducking, hot paddles, and reaching for sacks that are always too far and always too heavy. No one speaks unless necessary. You know your place by the scorch marks on the floor and the dents in the table that your hands helped shape. The oven is wide and deep, a stone mouth that never stops eating. You work beside it, sweat pooling at your collar, wrists burning from the heat. Someone shouts, "Another batch ready," and you reach for the paddle, slipping the raw loaves into the fire's throat. If you're too slow, someone else gets scolded. If you're too fast, the bread burns. There's no praise for doing it right, only correction when it's wrong. You don't eat the bread, not the kind you make anyway. That goes to soldiers, to merchants, to people who don't think twice about where it came from. If there are scraps, stale corners, crusts dropped on the floor, and dusted off when no one's looking, those are yours. You chew fast. You don't waste time pretending it's enough. By midday, your arms shake. Not dramatically, just enough that you notice. That means you're on schedule. The bread is piled high, stacked in baskets, and hauled away by carts. You don't go with it. You stay and sweep. You scrub. You start again. There's always more to make. More orders. More mouths to feed that will never see yours. You don't dream while baking. Dreams require air, space. What you have is flour dust in your nose and the faint hope that tonight you'll get a full sleep before someone shakes you awake for the fire. You wash your hands with cold water that smells like smoke. The flour sticks anyway. This is the life behind the loaves. Not a craft, not an art, a function. You are one cog in the city's hunger, turning steadily, anonymously. The bread will make it to tables you'll never see. People will tear into it, talk over it, bless it. They won't taste the burn in your fingers, or the weight in your spine, or the silence you've mastered, but it's there, baked in, every time. The baths are already alive by the time you arrive. Not loud, not yet, but stirring. The heat seeps up through the tiles, a slow, choking warmth that rises from the hypocausts below. You can feel it through the soles of your sandals, the kind of heat that clings to you even after you've stepped away. It's still early, but the water has to be hot before the citizens arrive. The rich don't like to wait for comfort. You start with the fire. You always start with the fire. Bent low in the stoke room, tossing wood into a furnace that could swallow a man whole. You don't speak here. The noise of burning is constant. Crackling, hissing, breathing. You've burned yourself more times than you remember. The skin on your forearms is a map of old mistakes, and your hands are red even when they're clean. When the flames are steady, you move through the narrow service halls like steam. Silent, useful. The floors above you hum with footsteps, bathers, moving from the tepidarium to the caldarium, their voices echoing through vaulted ceilings. You hear laughter, gossip, the splash of water. You don't look up. You don't pause. You refill oil jars. You sweep errant leaves from the footpaths. You collect towels dropped like afterthoughts. There's a rhythm to it. Not elegant, not soothing, efficient. A sharp kind of ballet where the dancers are invisible and the audience doesn't know they're being served. You move beside the hot pools and avoid eye contact. If someone gestures, you obey. If someone complains, you apologize. You don't answer back, even when they call you names that sting. Especially then. The marble is beautiful, but it's not yours. The bath oils smell sweet, but they're not for your skin. You spend the day touching other people's comfort, smoothing their arms with olive oil, scraping dead skin from their backs, kneeling on stone as they float and talk and forget you exist. Their leisure is your labor. Their ease is balanced on your silence. Sometimes they ask for massage. You press their shoulders until your fingers shake. They don't notice, or they pretend not to. The lines between servant and furniture blur here. You are part of the building, a body that moves soap and heat and towels into place. If you do your job perfectly, no one speaks to you at all. You're not allowed to bathe, not in the public pools, not even after hours. You rinse with cold water behind the furnace if you're lucky. If not, you wipe off what sweat you can and go to bed smelling like other people's skin. It's not filth, exactly, but it's not clean either. Cleanliness here is performance, a show for those who can afford it. You're just backstage, covered in heat and effort. By evening, your legs feel hollow. Your arms drag slightly when you move. You light the lamps before the last bathers leave, and then snuff them out when they're gone. No one thanks you. They don't have to. You're not here for gratitude. You're here because someone else decided you were. And tomorrow, you'll do it all again. You'll start the fires. You'll heat the marble. You'll prepare a world that isn't yours. And when they say Rome was clean, refined, advanced, no one will think of your hands, raw and soaked and invisible in the steam. Food isn't pleasure, not for you. It's not variety or spice or anything that lingers past the moment it's swallowed. It's calculation. It's hope disguised as habit. You eat what you're given, and most days, you don't ask what it is. There's no menu, no choice, no complaint. Hunger doesn't leave room for opinions. You eat after the others, always after. What's left is yours. Bread crusts, soft if they're fresh, brittle if they're not. A scoop of porridge scraped from the pot, still warm if you're lucky, burned at the bottom if you're not. Sometimes beans, if they've been soaked long enough to soften. Sometimes cabbage, boiled until the color drains out. Never quite enough, never quite hot, but enough to remind your stomach what it means to settle. You learn to eat slowly, even when your body wants the opposite. Rushing feels wrong, like you might finish and realize there's nothing left for the next time. You chew like it matters. You chew like it's sacred, because to you, it is. The bread you handle in the bakery isn't for your table. It's better, lighter, richer. You smell it rising in the oven and know you'll never taste it unless someone drops a piece. Even then, it's a risk to reach for it. You eat the darker stuff, heavy loaves made with barley or spelt, the kind that crumble in your hands and weigh more than they rise. You soak it in water or oil if you're allowed to. Otherwise, you chew until it gives in. Meat is a rumor, a story passed from one hungry person to another. Maybe someone's pig didn't survive the winter. Maybe there's a festival coming and someone generous will share. Maybe not. You don't count on it. When meat does appear, a scrap of pork fat, a bone with something still clinging to it, it's not eaten. It's treasured, boiled, picked clean, boiled again. Flavor is pulled like thread until nothing's left. Most of what you eat comes in one color, brown. The porridge, the bread, the beans. Some days you might see a splash of green from lentils or leeks or onion tops if the season's right. Garlic, if you're lucky. You know the garden more by what's missing than what grows. The good herbs are for the house upstairs. You get the roots, bitter, strong, meant to fill space more than nourish. Drinks are simpler, water, if it's clean, and that's not always guaranteed. More often, it's diluted wine, just enough to cut the taste of the street out of the cup. If you live near a vineyard, you might get lucky. If not, the water tastes like dust or rust or whatever washed through the pipes last. You drink anyway. You always drink. Hunger can be tricked. Thirst never waits. Some days, you skip meals entirely, not as punishment, just because there isn't anything. You learn how to stretch energy the same way you stretch bread, slowly, carefully, pretending it's enough. You move slower. You think smaller. You rest when you shouldn't, just long enough to stop the shaking. And still, you get up the next day. You light the fire. You scrub the stone. You carry the bucket. Because food may be scarce, but duty isn't. And even with an empty stomach, your hands still know what they're supposed to do. That's the truth of Roman food. Not the banquets, not the platters, not the olives in bowls carved from ivory. Just a pot, a piece of bread, and the hope that tomorrow tastes more than today. You don't sleep in a room so much as a corner, maybe a cellar, maybe a back hallway, near the kitchen, whatever space was left over after the rest of the house claimed its comfort. You don't remember choosing it. You just ended up there, like water, finding the lowest place to settle. There's no door, just a curtain, or nothing at all. The floor is packed earth or stone. It's cold in winter, sticky in summer. You've laid straw over it more times than you can count, and swept it out just as often when it turned to dust beneath your body. It never stays clean. It never stays dry. You sleep in your clothes, wrapped in whatever cloth you haven't been made to wash that day. There's no bed, not the way others think of beds. Sometimes you have a mat, sometimes just your arm. You curl in tight, not for comfort, for space. You've learned to fold yourself small. Some nights you share the corner. Another attendant, a kitchen boy, someone else who works in the same silence you do. You face opposite directions and pretend. Sleep comes easier that way. The house settles around you at night, but never truly sleeps. The walls creak. The rafters shift. Somewhere upstairs, someone turns over in a real bed and mutters in their dreams. You listen for footsteps, not because you expect them, but because you're trained to. Even in rest, your body keeps watch. You don't fall asleep. You wear yourself into unconsciousness. Your body gives out before your mind does. That's how it works. You lie there thinking of nothing and everything until the ache in your shoulders dulls enough for your thoughts to blur. Then, maybe, if it's a good night, you forget where you are for a little while. But sleep never lasts. Not fully. You wake in the middle of the night for no reason. You shift. You sit up. You listen. There's always something. A rat in the wall. A pot left too close to the fire. Someone snoring through a broken nose. You get used to half sleep. Sleep that hovers just beneath the surface. ready to break. When you dream, you don't tell anyone. Dreams aren't useful. They don't make the fire burn hotter or the bread rise faster. You've had dreams where you flew, where you were full, where your hands didn't hurt. They vanish by morning. The ache stays. You learn not to chase the softness. Your body hurts in ways that don't show. Joints that crack when you lift the same bucket you've lifted every day for years. A limp that flares up after rain, blisters that reopen because sandals don't last long when they belong to someone like you. You don't complain. Who would you tell? Some nights, it's too cold to sleep. You press against the wall and pull your arms inside your tunic, hoping the heat stays in. Other nights, it's too hot, and the air tastes like ash. You lie there sweating, praying the fire doesn't go out, but also praying for breath. There's no winning, just endurance. When morning comes, there's no difference between rest and waking. You rise because the footsteps start again, because water needs carrying, because ash needs sweeping. You stand even when your body begs you not to. That's what shelter means here. Not safety, not rest, just a space you return to because no one else needed it. Just enough floor to remind you you're still alive, and just enough sleep to make sure you keep going. You don't ask questions, not because you're shy, but because you already know the answer. The answer is no, or worse, silence. In this life, silence can mean anything. A warning, a punishment, a decision made above your head, about your body, that no one thought you needed to hear. There are rules here, dozens of them, hundreds. Some are spoken. Don't touch what isn't yours. Don't speak unless spoken to. Don't eat before the master. But most of them are felt. Invisible lines you only discover when you've already crossed them. The wrong look, the wrong pace, the wrong breath at the wrong time. And when you learn quickly. You learn quickly. Everything is owned. Not just land, not just buildings, but time, bodies, breath. If you are enslaved, you are part of a household inventory. Your name might be written next to a broom or a pair of sandals, not because you matter, but because the master wants to keep track of his property. You can't leave. You can't negotiate. Your labor is expected, like rain in the spring or dust in the corners of the floor. If you fall ill, you're either replaced or scolded. If you get better, you return to work. If you don't, the work continues anyway. Rome does not wait. The law allows it, encourages it. There are rules, yes, limits to punishment, standards of treatment, but they're written in the language of men who've never had to clean someone else's chamber pot. Justice doesn't wear your sandals. It wears silk, and it sits in marble halls, and it only listens when powerful voices do the speaking. You've heard of freedom. Maybe you've seen it. Someone old, someone favored, granted manumission after decades of service. Freedman, a rare word. It sounds heavy with reward, but you know better. Even freedom comes with strings. Loyalty, debt, memory. You're always someone's former something. The stain never lifts entirely. And yet, the system holds. Not because it's good, but because it's familiar, predictable. A slave knows what each day will cost, what each silence will protect. A master knows what they are owed and how to collect it. The coin keeps moving. The grain keeps flowing. The streets keep shining. No one questions the machine when it runs. They only notice when it breaks. And by then, someone's already been punished for letting it. You don't think of it as oppression, not every day. That's too big a word for a life spent worrying about cracked sandals and cold stew. You think of it as the shape of things, as natural as the sun rising over the forum and setting behind the bathhouse dome. The cruelty isn't always sharp. It's dull, worn into the floor, like the tracks of thousands of feet walking the same paths for generations. It's the cruelty of routine, of repetition without recognition, of a system that doesn't hate you, but never cared about you either. And still, it works. Rome runs on your bones and calls it greatness. Your sweat fills its fountains. Your hands polish its history. And the system doesn't thank you. It just keeps moving. Because as long as the statues still stand, no one asks who carved them. There are rules, but no one hands you a list. You learn them by watching, by listening, by guessing wrong, and paying the price. They're not carved into stone. They live in the pauses between commands. They hide in the way someone's voice tightens, in the speed of a footstep on a tiled floor. They change without warning, and they always matter more than they should. You don't need to steal to be punished. Sometimes all it takes is being too slow, or too tired, or standing where someone important suddenly wants to walk. The rules are not about fairness. They're about power. And the worst thing you can do is forget your place in the order of things, even for a breath. Punishment comes quickly when it comes. Not dramatic, not loud, just direct. A belt, a staff, a slap hard enough to knock the breath out of your ribs. Branding, in some cases, a letter burned into your skin. A permanent reminder that you once crossed a line. You've seen it before. You've smelled the singed flesh, watched someone grit their teeth until blood filled their mouth. No one speaks afterward. There's nothing to say. The mark does the talking, but more often it doesn't come to that because the threat is always there. And that's enough. The way someone glances too long in your direction. The sound of the steward's sandals slapping the ground. The moment of quiet after a mistake, when no one moves, waiting to see what the punishment will be. Fear fills in the spaces where pain hasn't arrived yet. It keeps everyone in line before the lash even lifts. You tell yourself it won't be you, that you know the rules well enough by now. But you've seen good people, careful people, get caught in the wrong mood at the wrong time. You've seen someone punished, not for what they did, but for what someone thought they might have done. There's no appeal, no defense, just the quick, dull violence of a system designed to keep you afraid. The worst punishments aren't always physical. They're personal, being sent away, sold to another household. You don't have a say. You might be pulled from everything you've known, the corner you slept in, the people you trusted, and sent to a stranger's home where the rules are different and the discipline harsher. The fear isn't just of pain, it's of losing the little stability you've managed to carve out in a world that never promised it to you in the first place. Some try to run, a few make it far enough to tell stories about it, but most don't. Most are caught, dragged back, made into a lesson, shackled, displayed, punished in ways designed to echo. The body heals, but the fear lingers, not just in them, but in everyone watching. That's the point. Make an example. Let the rest of the room draw their own conclusions. But the system doesn't need to punish every day. It only needs to suggest it. The suggestion is everywhere. In the silence, after a broken plate, in the raised eyebrow of a master, in the way the steward picks up a ledger and looks around the room. You begin to self-correct. You move more quietly, answer faster, smile just enough to stay invisible. Not too much, just enough. And when the day ends without punishment, it doesn't feel like peace. It feels like a narrow escape, like slipping past something that might have snapped shut on you if you'd breathed wrong. No celebration, just a slow, careful exhale. You don't resent the rules. That takes energy. You follow them because you have to, because no one's coming to change them, because this world wasn't built with your comfort in mind. You navigate it the way a blind man navigates a crowded street, slowly, cautiously, with the memory of bruises fresh enough to guide you. Obedience doesn't buy freedom. It buys time. Another day, another meal, another chance to avoid the attention, could turn cruel in a second. You don't get praised for following the rules. You get left alone. And in this life, that's reward enough. You're not free, but you still make choices. Not big ones. Not the kind that change the world or overturn anything, but small ones. Quiet ones. The sort no one notices except you. And sometimes that's enough. You know the rules. You've followed them long enough to fold them into your body, into how you move, how you speak, how you keep your eyes just low enough, and your shoulders just small enough. But you also know where the rules end, where they fray, where you can step just outside of them for a moment and feel like something more than what you're told to be. Sometimes it's a stolen moment of rest. You finish your task 2 minutes early and lean against the wall before anyone sees. You breathe. Not deeply, not for long. Just enough. You let your muscles go soft for 10 heartbeats. Then you straighten up and move again. No one notices. They never do. That's what makes it yours. You take food sometimes. Not out of greed. Out of timing. A crust left on a table. A smear of honey still clinging to a bowl. You pass by. Wipe it with your finger. Tuck it quickly into your mouth. It's not satisfying. Not really. But it's yours. You didn't ask. You didn't wait. And in this world, taking something before it's offered feels almost holy. You laugh when you can. It's quiet, controlled, buried deep in your chest. Someone says something under their breath. A mocking impression of the steward's pompous walk. The master's lisp when he's been drinking. You smirk. The girl beside you bites the inside of her cheek to keep from laughing aloud. That's how it works. Humor, like a whispered rebellion, a shared joke. And for a moment, the power doesn't belong to them. There are marks scratched into the back wall of the latrine. Lines, symbols, names. Someone drew a fish. Someone else carved a word in Greek, poorly spelled. You don't know who started it, but you added your own mark one night with a bent nail and a stolen minute. It's not art, it's not even readable, but it's there, and no one can take it back. You fix things for others, quietly. A broken sandal strap, a loose thread in someone's tunic. You don't charge, you don't explain. You just fix it, hand it back, and walk away. It's not kindness because it's expected. It's kindness because it's defiant. Because the system you live in doesn't reward generosity, which makes it the most human thing you can do. On cold mornings, you stand near the kitchen fires, longer than you need to, just long enough for your fingers to stop aching. No one tells you to move. They might. They probably will. But until then, you take the heat like a stolen luxury. You carry the warmth with you, tucked into your sleeves. You make patterns in the dust. You hum when no one's listening. You touch the same stone every morning on your way to the well because it feels lucky. You remember the names of people long gone, not out loud, not foolishly, but inside, quietly. A name is a kind of defiance too, a soft resistance to being erased. You don't dream of revolution. You dream of surviving with something intact. A story, a habit, a small, ridiculous joke that lives on because you whispered it to someone who'll whisper it to someone else. You know how power works. You know it rarely changes hands. But you also know it doesn't own everything. Some days you hear someone speak kindly to you, not as a master, not as a command, just a word, thank you maybe, or your name, said the right way. You don't expect it. You don't rely on it. But when it happens, you hold on to it like a stone in your pocket. These aren't acts of defiance that make history. They don't leave smoke or scars. They won't be remembered. But they are resistance. Because they say you haven't disappeared, that you're still there, underneath the layers they've piled on top of you. You weren't born to be quiet. You learned to be. You weren't built to be obedient. You were shaped that way by repetition. But inside, something still stretches toward light. Not in anger, not in desperation, just in the slow, steady way that things survive. And for now, that's enough. You already know what your death will look like. Not the details, not the exact moment or cause, but the rhythm of it. Quiet, undramatic. A closing of the eyes somewhere between one chore and the next. Not in battle, not in defiance, and certainly not in comfort. Just the end of a long day that never truly ended. No one will announce it. No one will stop working. The house won't go quiet. The world won't pause. You'll be gone, and the floor will still need scrubbing. The ovens will still need tending, and someone else, younger, newer, less worn out, will be given your tasks. Your name, if they remember it, will be mentioned once, maybe, then replaced. Sometimes death comes slowly, a cough that won't leave, a sore that doesn't heal, a deep ache in the bones that spreads quietly until it takes everything. Other times it comes all at once, a collapsed ladder, a blade drawn in anger, a punishment that lasted too long. But it doesn't really matter how. In the eyes of the system, the outcome is the same. One less mouth to feed, one more space to fill. If they bury you, it won't be with ceremony. There will be no funeral, no coins for the ferrymen, no offerings to the gods, unless someone kind decides to whisper a prayer on their own time. You'll be wrapped in a scrap of cloth, or not, and taken outside the city walls, buried quickly, shallowly, marked, if at all, by a stone without words. Most enslaved people were never given proper graves. Cremation was expensive. Tombstones were for citizens. You were property in life, and in death, just debris. That's not cruelty. That's routine. It's how the machine moves forward without slowing down. But the part no one talks about, the part that feels heavier than death itself, is how quickly you'll be forgotten, not by the people who knew you well, not right away, but the forgetting begins almost immediately, and it comes faster than anyone expects. You disappear in pieces. Your voice, your habits, your face, then the space you occupied, then even the memory of that space. You've watched it happen to others. The girl who always sang while she cleaned the stairs. The boy who could carry 2 amphorae at once. They were here. Now they're not, and the silence they leave behind gets filled too fast to hold on to them. Maybe someone lights a candle. Maybe someone whispers a name before sleep. But those things don't last. Not when the days stretch endlessly, and grief has to make room for hunger and ash and orders barked before sunrise. There's no time to mourn in a world that barely lets you rest. You hope, privately, quietly, that someone will remember you, not because you were important, just because you were here, because you smiled in the mornings, or shared what little you had, or once told a joke that made someone laugh so hard they dropped a bowl. You hope that memory survives, that it passes between 2 people in the back of the kitchen long after you're gone. There's no tomb to preserve your name, but maybe it's scratched into a wall. Maybe it's whispered in a story. That's all you have. Not legacy, but presence. Not permanence, but trace. You've said goodbye to people you cared for without ever saying the word. You just noticed they hadn't come back, and no one wanted to talk about it, because speaking about the dead too often starts to sound like asking questions, and asking questions in this world is a risk. So you hold on to them quietly. A name, a face, a voice that used to hum over the sound of water boiling, and you pray, not in the grand temple way, but the kind of prayer that sounds more like memory than worship, that when your time comes, someone will hold on to yours, too. Even if your name fades, you hope something of you remains. A habit passed on, a phrase repeated without knowing where it came from, a mark scratched in stone, rubbed smooth over time, but still there if the light hits it right. That, too, is survival, because death is certain, but forgetting, that's the part you fear more, and the only answer to it is to live in such a way that, even if no one says your name out loud, the world still remembers your hands touched it. You wake up before the sun, because the system says you do, not in words, not in writing, but in the way your life has been shaped. Your hands move before your thoughts do. That's how deeply it lives in you. Not rules carved in stone, but a rhythm burned into your bones. You're one part of a machine so large, it doesn't need to explain itself. Rome runs on more than roads and soldiers. It runs on quiet labor, on unrecorded sweat, on the backs of people whose names fade before the dust on their sandals does. You're not the exception. You're the rule. The system isn't loud. It doesn't shout its power. It doesn't need to. It moves like the sun, steady, assumed, overhead, whether you like it or not. You don't vote. You don't speak in the forum. You don't debate law or dictate policy, but you turn the wheel. You keep the bread baking, the water warm, the floor clean. If you stop, Rome doesn't fall. Not immediately, but the corners crack, and someone will notice. Power lives above you, in marble, in scrolls, in quiet rooms full of important men who don't know your face, but their comfort depends on your routine. They sleep in clean beds because you scrubbed the sheets. They write letters because you ground the ink. They eat olives because you hauled the crate. They talk about order and civilization while you carry it on your back. There are layers to the system, and you're at the bottom. But that's how it was built. That's how it keeps turning. Senators, equestrians, citizens, freedmen, slaves, each placed like a gear in a clock, each one spinning just fast enough to keep the others moving. You don't question the design. There's no time. You're not a citizen. You're not meant to be. Citizenship is a reward, a category, a boundary. You exist outside of it, like a shadow on the wall. You can see it, but you don't belong to it. That's not an accident. It's the point. You've heard people call it a republic, then an empire. But those are words spoken from balconies. Down here, at ground level, the shape doesn't change. The emperor is still a distant name. The rules still come down the chain, filtered through the house, through the steward, through the tasks that never stop arriving. The system keeps turning because fear oils it, not the sharp kind, the dull kind. Fear of punishment, fear of being sold, fear of being forgotten, but also the deeper fear that nothing will ever change, that this is it, that this is the shape your life will take until it stops. But even fear isn't the full story. There's routine, and routine brings a kind of safety. You know your place, you know what's expected, you know how to survive, and in a world like this, that's no small thing. You find small ways to move inside the gears without getting caught. You time your chores. You share small kindnesses. You avoid attention. You don't challenge the system. Not because you agree with it, but because you've learned the cost of being noticed. Rome praises itself for law and order, but what it truly thrives on is predictability. Your labor is part of that. Your silence, your daily presence. Rome runs because you do, and it thanks you by pretending you were never there. The statues remember emperors. The arches remember battles. The stones remember footsteps, but not whose. And yet, the system needs those footsteps, needs you to rise each morning and light the fire again. You've learned to make peace with it, not with the injustice, but with the reality. You don't expect justice. You expect structure. And the Roman system gives you that. Brutal, durable, deeply unfair, but structured. The machine is still turning. The city still stands. And somewhere, beneath all the marble and myth, your hands are keeping it upright, unseen, unthanked, but essential. The empire may fall, but you won't see it. Not from where you stand. When it happens, it won't feel like a collapse. It will feel like a crack that widens slowly, year after year. Trade routes shifting, walls crumbling, orders coming less often, And still, the work will continue because habit lasts longer than command. You don't measure history the way scholars do, not by wars or decrees or the rise of marble statues. You measure it by the rhythm of survival, by how many times the stew boiled without burning, by how many winters you made it through with your fingers intact. You don't record dates. You remember seasons. You remember whose cough never got better, who returned from the fields limping, who didn't return at all. You won't be remembered in the epics. There are no poets writing verses about how you fetched water before dawn, or how you repaired the master's sandals without being asked. No temples will carry your name in stone. And yet, you were Rome, not the Rome that built arches, the Rome that cooked meals under them. The power didn't live in emperors alone. It lived in repetition, in endurance, in the way your hands kept moving, day after day, even when no one noticed. You didn't need to be seen. You just needed to survive. And you did. You endured, not because the world made room for you, but because you carved it out yourself. That is what endures. What endures. Not monuments, which crack. Not titles, which fade. Not coin, which rusts, but the quiet persistence of people like you, who woke up tired and still stood up, who carried burdens and still found time to share bread, who knew what the system was and still chose small kindnesses inside it. You didn't live for glory. You lived for the next hour, the next task, the next moment of rest. And somehow, across the centuries, that choice, repeated 1,000 times over by 1,000 hands like yours, is what kept the world turning. Rome fell eventually. Its roads broke, its aqueducts dried, its laws scattered. But people kept planting grain, kept drawing water, kept singing over fires, even if no one wrote the songs down. They passed stories to their children, not about emperors, but about how to mend a shirt, how to spot a bad frost, how to hold onto warmth through a bitter night. That was never called history, but it should have been, because without that, without you, there would have been no Rome to remember at all. And in that way, you endure, you and all those like you, not because your name was carved into a monument, but because your life was carried forward in hands, in habits, in quiet strength. Someone lived because you fed them. Someone laughed because you said something just ridiculous enough to cut through the fog of another hard day. Someone remembered the way you tied your sandals, or stirred your pot, or sang that song about spring when the snow started to melt. Maybe they told someone else. Maybe that memory made it farther than you did. And maybe that's enough. Because even if no one knows your name, even if your story is just another thread too thin to survive the weight of history, the cloth still holds, the warmth remains, and somewhere, even now, someone is sweeping a floor, lighting a fire, tucking away a half loaf of bread, not knowing where the habit came from, only that it matters. So what endures? Not empire, not marble, but effort, routine, care, things done without thanks and without witness. And maybe, just maybe, that's the most Roman thing of all. That's all for tonight. You've walked the streets of Rome, not as a senator or a soldier, but as the hands that lit the lamps and scrubbed the marble, the ones history forgets, but who held the whole thing up quietly. Maybe you'll remember some of it, or maybe you won't. Maybe it will blur, like a half-dream, footsteps echoing on stone, the smell of bread, the ache of repetition. That's all right. This story was never meant to be sharp, just steady, just real. If you're still here, still listening, still awake, thank you. But if your eyes are already heavy, if your thoughts have drifted somewhere softer than this world we built together, then that's okay too. You've earned your rest, so close your eyes. Let the city fade behind you, and good night.